Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to hear a story about that Jesus told. It's called the parable of the fig tree. Jesus told this story to remind people that every day is a gift from God and that we should use it wisely. Once there was a man who had a vineyard. This man loved figs, so he planted a fig tree. He couldn't wait to eat the figs from the tree. Every year the man came to the vineyard to check the tree. The first year, no figs. The second year, no figs. The third year, no figs. The man told the gardener, "I planted this fig tree because I love figs. Each year I check it, but still no figs. Cut this tree down." But the gardener was smart. "Wait one more year," he said. "Let's take special care of it and give it one more chance. I'll give you the best figs you'll ever have." And I bet the next year he had wonderful figs. So sometimes it just takes a little while for things to get going. And so it says, try some figs and talk about ways your faith can grow. Think about that sometimes things just take a little while, but once they get started, then they'll bloom. Mother's wrote, "Our Ruby taught us all a lot. She became someone who helped change our country. She was part of history. Just like generals and presidents are part of history, they are leaders, and so was Ruby. She led us away from hate, she led us nearer to knowing each other, the white folks and the black folks." And signed, Ruby's mother. Ruby Bridges was born in a small town near Taylortown, Mississippi. It was we were very, very poor, Ruby said. "My daddy worked picking crops. We just barely got by. There were times when we didn't have much to eat. The people who owned the land were bringing in machines to pick the crops, so my daddy lost his job, and that's when we had to move. I remember us leaving. I was 4, I think." She looks really sad. In 1957, the family moved to New Orleans. Ruby's father became a janitor. Her mother took care of children during the day. After they were tucked in bed, Ruby's mother went to work scrubbing floors in the bank. Every Sunday, the family went to church. "We wanted our children to be near God's Spirit," Ruby's mother said. She wanted them to start feeling close to Him from the very start. At that time, black children and white children went to separate schools in New Orleans. The black children were not able to receive the same education as the white children. It wasn't fair, and it was against the nation's laws. In 1960, a judge ordered 4 black girls to go to 2 white elementary schools. 3 of these girls were sent to McDonough. 6-year-old Ruby Bridges was sent to 1st grade in the William Prance Elementary School. Ruby's parents were proud that their daughter had been chosen to be part of an important event in American history. They went to church. "We sat there and prayed to God," Ruby's mother said, "that we'd be strong and that we'd have courage and that we'd get through any trouble, and Ruby would be a good girl, and she hold her head up high, and to be a credit to her own people and a credit to all the American people. We prayed long and we prayed hard." On Ruby's first day, a large crowd of angry white people gathered outside the France Elementary School. The people carried signs that said they didn't want black children in a white school. People called Ruby names. Some wanted to hurt her. The city and state police did not help Ruby. The President of the United States ordered federal marshals to walk with Ruby into the school building. The marshals had guns. So Every day for weeks that turned into months, Ruby experienced that kind of a school day. She walked into the France school surrounded by marshals, wearing a clean dress and a bow in her hair and carrying her lunch pail. Ruby walked slowly for the first few blocks. As Ruby approached the school, she saw a crowd of people marching up and down the street. Women, men, and children shouted at her. They pushed toward her. The marshals kept them from Ruby by threatening to arrest them. Ruby would hurry through the crowd and not say a word. The white people in the neighborhood would not send their children to a school when Ruby got inside the building. She was all alone, and her teacher, Miss Hurley. They were no one other children to keep Ruby company, to play with, and to learn and to eat lunch with. But every day Ruby went to the classroom with a big smile on her face and ready to get down to business of learning. She was polite and she worked well at her desk. Miss Hurley said she enjoyed her time there. She didn't seem nervous or anxious or irritable or scared. She seemed as normal and relaxed as any child had ever taught. So Ruby began learning how to read and write in an empty classroom in an empty building. Sometimes I'd look at her and wonder how she did it, said Miss Hurley, how she went by those mobs and sat here all by herself, yet seemed so relaxed and comfortable. Miss Hurley would question Ruby in order to find out if the girl was really nervous and if afraid, even though she seemed so calm and confident. But Ruby kept saying she was doing fine. The teacher decided to wait and see if Ruby would keep on being so relaxed and hopeful, or if she would gradually begin to wear down, or even decide that she no longer wanted to go to school. Then one morning something happened. Miss Hurley stood by a window in her classroom as she usually did, watching Ruby walk towards the school. Suddenly Ruby stopped right in front of the mob of howling and screaming people. She stood there facing all those men and women. She seemed to be talking to them. Miss Hurley saw Ruby's lips moving and wondered what Ruby could be saying. The crowd seemed ready to kill her. The marshals were frightened. They tried to persuade Ruby to move along. They tried to hurry her into the school, but Ruby wouldn't budge. Then Ruby stopped talking and walked into the school. When she went into the classroom, Miss Hurley asked her what happened. Miss Hurley told Ruby she'd been watching and that she was surprised when Ruby stopped and talked with the people in the mob. Ruby became irritated. I didn't stop and talk with them, she said. Ruby, I saw you talking, Miss Hurley said. I saw your lips moving. I wasn't talking, said Ruby. I was praying. I was praying for them. Every morning, Ruby had stopped a few blocks away from the school to say a prayer for the people who had hated her. This morning, she forgot until she was already in the middle of the angry mob. When school was over for the day, Ruby hurried through the mob as usual and walked a few blocks away, and the crowd was behind her. Ruby said a prayer, and she repeated twice a day, before and after school. Please, God, try to forgive these people, because even if they say bad things, they don't know what they are doing, so you can forgive them, just like you did those folks are a long time ago when they said terrible things about you. Later that year, 2 white boys joined Ruby at the France elementary school. Their parents were tired of seeing the boys get into mischief around the house, and they could have been in school and learning. The mob became very angry with the first white boys that went back to school, but those boys were soon joined by other children. We've been sitting back and letting our children get cheated out of an education because some people have tried to take the law into their own hands, one parent said. It's time for us to fight for the side of the law and for our children, for the right to go to school and to get their education. They all did get their education, and Ruby and a growing number of boys and girls went into the school with her. By the time Ruby was in the 2nd grade, the mobs had given up their struggle to scare Ruby and defeat the federal judge's orders in New Orleans schools be desegregated so that children of all races might be in the same classroom. Year after year, Ruby went to France school. She graduated from it and then went on to graduate from high school. Ruby Bridges is married to a building contractor and has 4 sons who attend school within the New Orleans public school system. Now a successful businesswoman, she has created the Ruby Bridges Educational Foundation for the purpose of increasing parental involvement in schools. And thankfully today, that is something that's nice. No matter what your background is, the public schools are open to everybody, and the churches, and she was one brave little girl. So,
All right.